My clock shows noon. So I'd like to welcome everybody to our webinar today. One of the motivations for this is that we know financial stress is always present in production agriculture, just in varying degrees, depending on circumstances. So weather delays in planting, drought, uncertain markets, maybe personal circumstances such as a family death or divorce, prompt problems and contribute to financial concerns. So regardless of the causes, it's important for everyone to be aware of programs and tools to help to manage these problems, whether it's a breakdown in communications or cash flow concerns. And so that's our focus for today's programs, to emphasize some programs, tools, and resources that are available. So we're going to kick it off by having Mike Mayberry, who's the director of the Oklahoma Ag Mediation Program, talk about its role in our agricultural environment and the way that program has evolved over time and the constraints that they face in operating. So with that, Mike, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Damona, and thanks to Brent Ladd for setting this up and making it so easy on the presenters. It's a good day in Oklahoma. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to speak with you today and work hand in hand with Dr. Doi and with the IFMAPS program. We often exchange information. In fact, she serves on our advisory board for the Oklahoma Ag Mediation Program and offers us good strategy skills and things to think about in the future and how we might do things in such a way as to best serve the Oklahoma producers. I have been executive director now of the Oklahoma Agriculture Mediation Program for right at 3.5 years. And we're an Oklahoma not-for-profit corporation that is funded primarily through a USDA grant that generates directly out of Washington to our program. And we're one of 40 different programs that exist across the nation. Our role is to help Oklahoma producers, and that means farmers, ranchers, it may be cattle, crops, any kind of producer in Oklahoma, even specialized producers. Did a case recently with a beekeeper, as an example. So the thing that we go back to is how long the program has existed in Oklahoma. It was founded in 1987 and has been in the statutes since nearly that time as the first certified program in the nation. Our job is to provide, because we are grant funded, no cost mediation, as you can see from the slide, between agricultural producers in Oklahoma and oftentimes with the USDA agencies, which might be the Farm Service Agency, NRCS, Rural Development, or perhaps with an ag lender that could be a feed store, it could be a bank. Oftentimes, and we'll get into this in just a minute to talk about when a producer might need us and we may be best able to help through our services. But first, let's talk a little bit about mediation and what that actually is. Mediation is a program that's actively growing in the court system right now. It's adjunct to that, but it allows people another way to resolve what might be legal issues, maybe financial issues that go along with the process of farming and ranching. It's voluntary. It's very, very informal. Usually there's a dispute that we try to resolve confidentially. So we go to a neutral territory and have a meeting. That's called the mediation itself. And we sit down and I lead the meeting, or another mediator might lead the meeting to try to resolve it without going through court or through any more formal appeal process. The typical mediation will last 2 to 3 hours, and we'll get into that just a little bit more as we go on. But the types of mediation would include farm credit and loan servicing. You can read the slide there with me. Perhaps a loan delinquency, a farm plan that may not be proving out to be feasible, compliance with the contract or eligibility issues. And we see some that are involving foreclosures and loan acceleration when the producer is unable to make the payments or not able to make them when required. And then conservation contracts is last on the list there. The examples of a rural development kind of case would be it may be a loan, it may be a home loan. If it's an NRCS type case, it may involve an obligation to plant or not plant. Several of the mediations that I've done in recent times have involved someone that promised to plant a crop to hold the soil, and then for whatever reason they didn't do so. It might have been too wet, it might have been too dry, it may have been a mistake, or it may have just been a misunderstanding. FSA type mediations usually involve money or not being accepted into the program because there's a letter that generates that goes out to when you get your determination letter from any of these agencies. That's what they call it, is the letter that you get. And on the back of all those letters is a list of choices that you can pursue if you disagree with the decision that's been made. Listed there as a first choice is you can choose to accept the decision, or you can also choose to ask for mediation and go into this neutral meeting and discuss what decision-making process was involved and try to get to a different answer. And then finally, there may be discussions of being indebted and not making payments on time, or something has caused that, whether it be sickness in the family or with the producer. Weather events could have happened, something in the form of a disaster, and as we know in Oklahoma, that could show up in the form of drought, an extended ice storm, wildfires. Those have all happened easily within the last 2 years, not to mention the markets that are always changing, whether it be cattle or crop markets. Ag mediation lets us have this meeting, and I don't want anyone to be confused. During the mediation, the mediator is not like a judge who comes in and listens to one side and the other side and then makes a decision that everybody has to live with. The mediator draws out what the real problem is. That means that he'll ask one party or the other to speak first, and everybody's required to speak nicely and kindly to each other. Rarely do emotions rise in a mediation, but it can happen. But most times it's a safe place to discuss the problem and just work toward a solution that may be better than the one that was underway when the parties arrived in the room. So as a mediator, when I'm mediating, I usually let the USDA agency speak first and summarize quickly what the problem is, and then I'll ask some questions, and then I'll go over to the producer and ask the producer, what do you think brings us here today? And they'll tell it from their perspective. I see many, many times that there's either been a misunderstanding of information or there's been events that were beyond the control of the producer that led them there. But we find more often than not that the most important thing is mediation gets us to talking about what could happen and what's going to happen if nothing happens. And I assure you that most often a producer not taking any action, including the selection to do mediation, is probably the worst choice. Because if we can talk about it, we can usually try to solve it, make it better than what brought them there today. But it doesn't cost anything. It's, as you'll see from the slide here, it says, we may be able to make it better within the producer's financial means. And what does that mean? It means maybe we can choose methodically what to pay first, what to pay second, what to pay third. Maybe we can get the people that are holding the debt to, if they feel comfortable that they're going to get paid down the road, that they would wait a little while and let the person catch up, the producer catch up. This is far less expensive than making an appeal or litigation or taking bankruptcy. In fact, because we're grant funded from the USDA, directly, as I said earlier, directly from Washington, we do not charge for this process, and we usually come to your area to do the mediation. If nothing else, we find that the mediation exchanged information that made it better for the parties involved. Usually the USDA person working with the producer has a good relationship, but sometimes when the producer is anxious about where they are in the situation, they would rather not talk to anybody, and this provides a safe environment for that conversation to take place. It happens pretty quickly. Usually within that 2 to 3 hours, we know what's going to happen next, and just talking about it reduces the stress that might go on if nobody's working to take steps to resolve the conflict. I find that I'm told over and over when I'm doing mediations that my demeanor is very, very helpful, and I like that because that's what I want it to be, so that I can get to the root of the problem and say, all right, could we do this or do that to help make this work? But again, the mediator, whoever the mediator is, does not decide things. The parties have to decide where they're going to go next. It's just a room full of suggestions of could we do this or could we do that. So you might say, well, okay, I'm in debt, or I failed to make my payments, or I know I'm not going to be able to make my payments. What should I do? Well, you can always contact. Usually you have to wait until you've received some kind of notice from the USDA agency, but on that letter or through this program, you would know about our office and you can ask for mediation. We'll take it then and contact all the parties, schedule a mediation, assign a mediator, and then we'll get the meeting set up, the mediation meeting set up at a place typically close to you, the producer and the lender, so it's convenient to everybody. And then I've already covered the part about the mediator being neutral and not making decisions. If an agreement or a modification of the existing situation is reached, we'll write that down into a settlement agreement, and then have both parties sign it, and that'll be the next steps that'll be taken by the parties, because they then usually leave the mediation knowing what they're going to do next. We cover all 77 counties. That was on a previous slide. You don't have to actually live in Oklahoma to use the service, but you do need to have your affected farming or ranching operation be located in Oklahoma. So if you were to call me from Kansas and ask, could we do a mediation about my Kansas operation, the answer is no. But if you lived in Kansas and you had an Oklahoma operation, indeed you could call the mediation office and ask for Oklahoma to help you with that. Kansas also has a mediation office, so it's one of the 40 as we are. So we've talked about cost. It's no cost. And let me assure the listeners today that just because the grants come from USDA does not mean that the mediator has any obligation to side with USDA or whoever asked for the mediation. Mediators ethically are bound to be neutral and not take sides on either side or form an opinion about who ought to win and who ought to lose. The grant monies come in when we report to DC how many cases we did in a year or what types of cases we did. We do not include any names or any information that would identify the person that asked for and requested the mediation. All we do is report numbers back to them, and we did this many mediations, and this is generally the part of the state that we did them in and the type of mediation it was. So we've talked about trying to do them locally to the producer and the lender or the USDA office. And that 96% of the ones we do are localized to that area, and we'll hit the road and go to the place where the mediation is closer to the parties. Do you need to bring a lawyer or an accountant or anybody else to the mediation? The answer is yes and no. The answer is yes if the accountant can help answer questions that the party might not be able to answer. The lawyer may have some, if there's a lawyer involved, may have something to bring to the table that would be a legal issue that needs consideration. But no, you're not required to bring either. The only thing we ask is that the parties in the room have the authority to make a decision and settle the matter, and they need to come with that or bring the right person to the room that does have that authority. Same way with documents and paperwork. I always encourage people to bring what they need to tell their story. The mediator does not interpret the documents, but they'll listen, and if there's a document that shows what the producer is trying to say, I encourage them to bring it so that they can show it to the other party across the table and say, this is what I received, or this is when I received it, so that may have bearing on it. How long does the mediation take? The actual event is 2 to 3 hours, as I said. We try to have, through our office, we try to do the actual mediation within 30 days of when we're first notified of it. Mediation, on a technical basis, stops the clock ticking on behalf of the producer that's asked for mediation, but they have to ask for the mediation within 30 days of receiving their determination or denial letter. If you don't request the mediation within that first 30 days of when you receive the letter, then you lose the opportunity to demand or request mediation because it does have a 30-day limitation on it. It always saddens me when somebody calls in on the 40th or the 50th day and says, I'd like to mediate, because when that happens, it makes it where the other party, whoever it might be, is not obligated to. But if they ask within the 30 days, if it's a USDA agency, they will almost always say, yes, we will mediate that. But if it's on the 40th or the 50th day, they typically say, no, we cannot do that because the time period to request mediation has lapsed. So I hate to use that expression that's on the slide now that says we are here to help, but that's really what we do. We have people call in here that are sometimes desperate and say, I need help and I need it now. We have ways that we can help people that are beyond just the actual mediation. We can refer to entities that may be able to help them if they're in crisis mode. But in the mediation itself, it's always confidential and it's non-adversarial, and it's really quite painless. So I encourage people to try that. We've already talked about the benefits of mediation over litigation and bankruptcy and foreclosure. I can't tell you the number of times in mediations where I myself have been able to discuss alternatives to foreclosure and stopping that process from occurring. Because sometimes a person wishes to pay and perhaps they've been sick and now they're well and they can start making payments again and work out an arrangement where they can catch up on the payments they're behind on. That's always so satisfying to everyone at the table because they really didn't want to miss the payments to start with, but circumstances led them to do so, and now they're ready to get back on their feet, and they just need to stop the foreclosure and proceed with making the payments and getting caught back up, and maybe even cycling the loan to where payments could change if that's possible in a particular circumstance. But the good news is many, many times we're able to do that. And it doesn't matter, that last bullet point, it doesn't matter if you're a very, very small farm operation or rancher operation or if you're the biggest one in the state of Oklahoma. We're going to give you the same level of service and we're going to take care of you to the best of our ability. I was hoping that we might see some questions come in, and I'll remind you that at this point, if you have a question, please write in and we'll do our best to answer it. Or if you think of something, I'm going to stay on the program while Dr. Doy is talking, and so if it comes to you as she's presenting, if it's her question, I'm certainly going to send it her way, but if you have one for about mediation that comes up during that time, I'll still be on here as well. I think we've talked about what we do, and I hope I've done a good job of explaining how we do it, why we do it, and what it would take for you to try mediation if you need it. You'll see us out at the different farm shows around town and around the state. We'll be up at KNID and Enid in January. We just put that on the calendar this morning. We're going to be at the Farm Bureau meeting, but we go to most of the major farm and ranch shows around the state. When we're there, we honestly don't expect people to come up. It's great if they want to and come up and tell us their problems on the spot. But most often our goal is to spread the information about our program so that we can make sure that you, the listeners, and anybody you know could find us if you needed us. Our 800 numbers there, our website, our emails are there on the current slide, along with our other regular phone numbers. But the thing that we most often say is you may not need us now, and you may never need us, but it may be your neighbor down the road that you sense is in trouble and they're getting a little more desperate on finding a solution for something. If that happens, please refer your neighbors to us and make sure they know about us as well. Our goal is simply to be available when needed, and we'll spring into action and do all we can to make the situation better. It may be several years down the road, things change, the next drought, the next market bust, or something changes. There are covered cases that we do through the USDA contract. Typically, one of the things that we hear at farm shows is, can you solve a fence line dispute between me and the next door neighbor? And that's not really what this program is about, but we're certainly there if it's a debt problem or a program that you tried to get into that you don't understand why you were turned down. We can help you figure out what thinking went into it and what processes went into it. Also, for any bankers that are on the line, the Guaranteed Loan Program went out last year and spoke to nearly every ag lender in the state. If you have a customer that's in trouble, nothing prevents you from calling us and asking us if we could help in that situation. Because I think we probably can, and we want to take a shot at it. But the thing that we're trying to do there is make sure that you all know we're available as well. And the best time to call is before they they get below the waterline, so to speak, in nautical terms, while they can still recover. And if nothing would prevent us from voluntarily asking everybody to come to the table and talk about options. So with that, I'm going to pause for a minute. I don't see any questions that have come in, but we do have our website, I guess, is down here in the chat line. On the web, we are www.ok.gov/mediation, and that gets you to our website. And with that, Damona, I think I'm going to go on pause, and it's
all right.
Probably your turn.
Well, thanks, Mike. We appreciate that. We appreciate all you do, and your presence in the state, because I know it has been a great benefit to a number of producers. All right, in the second part of our webinar today, I'm going to briefly highlight 3 resources: IFMAPS, our eFarm Management Library, and our borrower training course. So to give you an idea of what IFMAPS is about, a couple of years ago, I was planning a remodel of my kitchen and living area, and I was just stuck on how to get to where I wanted to be, despite conversations with a couple of home builders, remodelers, and a conversation with a friend led me to a recommendation for a consultant, and that consultant gave me a new idea that helped me solve my problem. And it was a great investment. So it was a fresh set of eyes, and I think that's what IFMAPS brings to cases. So having someone with an objective outside view to look at the finances can spur thinking about things in different ways and perhaps challenge producers to look at ways to better their financial situation that they may not have in the past. So IFMAPS has been around for about 30 years now. It's evolved over time, so it's shifted from a program that was subsidized by government grants and pass-throughs from the state legislature, so it's now fee-based entirely. You can see the costs are $500 for a relatively straightforward case that may take less than 15 hours. More complicated cases will cost more depending on the length of and the amount of time that's involved in doing that. We have a 1-800 number that producers can call to get in touch with a financial specialist that can work with them one-on-one to develop budgets, to develop financial statements, and to evaluate alternative plans. So while we do take referrals from lenders, or lenders may choose to refer producers to IFMAPS, the producer has to be the one that initiates the interest in working with IFMAPS to look at their financial situation. So the options for change, which is the title of our webinar today, haven't changed over time. There's often no magic bullets to solve people's problems. So it's going methodically through the different alternatives and thinking about how to assess the potential impact of them, to look at how much they really can contribute to changing the financial circumstances, and looking for the ideal mix in the end. So typically, belt tightening has already been done. There may be opportunities by presenting information on benchmarks that gives them a notion that perhaps they could do better in controlling cost if their cost of production is much higher than the average producer. Insurance protection may be recommended. So even if you're not in financial trouble, a disaster can create financial problems, and so making sure that you have the right mix of insurance can be important. There may be ways to increase farm returns, whether it's achieving a better price through some value-added marketing type programs, looking at underutilized assets that might be sold, looking at changes in enterprise mix, so getting a handle of where the profit and loss centers are in the farm can be insightful. So it may mean that you shrink one enterprise to expand another. So you shrink wheat acreages in favor of some alternative crops, for example. Changes in asset ownership may be appropriate. So if you've got a lot of machinery, or producer has a lot of machinery and equipment that's perhaps underutilized, either because of the scale of the farm or it can be used in other ways to generate additional income, then either supplementing the income through custom work may be a possibility, or it may be make more financial sense to sell the machinery and equipment and have work done through custom operators or custom farm work. Debt restructuring or rescheduling may be something that's necessary if all these other things have been tried and come up short. It requires both a willing lender as well as a borrower who's willing to perhaps pay more over a rescheduled time period in order to pay off the loan. Equity infusions are less common perhaps in agriculture than in other small businesses, but if there's an off-farm heir or someone else who wants to help out in a cash flow crunch, outside money can be brought into the operation perhaps for a share of ownership. Partial liquidation or liquidation are kind of the extreme examples and a last resort in many cases, but can help to resolve some problems. So IFMAP's analyses are not only focused on financially stressed situations, it can often be just looking at things in a different way, trying to do things better. But it may mean, and here's some specific examples of related to the evaluating options that I showed in the previous slide. So what's the income likely to be if we are thinking about retirement or perhaps scaling down the herd or even changing livestock enterprises? Can I buy something new, machinery and equipment, land? What are going to be the resulting loan payments associated with that? What's the cash flow going to be associated with that? So will it not only pay in the long run, but can I meet my loan obligations in the short run? Same thing with a new enterprise. If I want to add goats to help take care of brush or weed problems on the farm, how's that going to impact my finances? Perhaps I have a son or daughter who's interested in coming back. Are there ways that we could change the operation and earn enough income to support a second generation? The IFMAP's financial statements often serve as documentation for loan applications for diversification grants, for instance, from the Oklahoma Department of Ag, Food, and Forestry or other sources. The process is straightforward, much like the one that Ag Mediation uses. You call the 800 number. We assign the case to a local IFMAP specialist through our Stillwater office. That person then contacts the producers to describe the information that needs to be collected. It is, after all, the producer's plan, so they have to provide some records to support their history, but also to understand fully the current situation. So the producer gathers and summarizes the farm records. They then agree to meet at a mutually convenient time, often at the producer's place of business. Our IFMAP specialists use some computer software to develop the budgets and financial statements. Then they sit down with the producer to review them. So part of the process is to confirm that the data is correct, but also then to provide their insights into the financial situation, what's likely to be the financial performance, and changes in the financial situation with a continuation of the plan. They may also discuss some alternatives, so looking at selling assets, looking at financing in different ways. And so the alternative plan discussion is often an important part of that process. So farmers and ranchers have been overwhelmingly positive about the experience with IFMAPs because, again, it gives them insights that they may not have considered. It challenges them to think in different ways, and it gives them a roadmap to a better future ahead. So so we encourage people to consider calling IFMAPs if they need some help in putting together financial statements. Dr. Rodney Jones and Brent and I this past year, along with some of our area specialists and colleagues in other departments, have invested quite a bit of time in developing resources for a website that we've called eFarm Management. And so this website catalogs a lot of resources that we've developed over time in what we hope is a user-friendly way. you can see that while the focus is on financial management topics, there are also crop and livestock topics here as well. So I've, for demonstration purposes, clicked on the Developing a Farm Business Plan and done a screen capture there. So you can see that the components on this website include not only short videos, but PowerPoints associated with those videos. So you can look at the PowerPoint and see if it's a subject that you want to explore a bit more. We've also stripped the audio from those videos to create podcasts. So if you're driving a tractor and don't have the appropriate internet access or data plan, then you can listen to the audio for that component. So in this case, you can see that we've got 3 short videos. We've got the PowerPoints associated with them, audio, and a software tool link there as well. So when it's appropriate, you'll see links to all those resources, as well as some additional publications and other resources, including websites, in the links section below. So this is accessible and available to anyone free, so people who might be interested in enhancing their understanding of farm finances, agricultural finance topics can access these resources at any time. A parallel resource is for borrowers who may need to earn FSA borrower training credit. This is a more formal online course in Brightspace, not formal in that you can't get college credit for it, but formal in that the participants will take quizzes and do exercises, complete homeworks that are graded and scored, so that we can document for FSA increases in skills and levels of understanding in the course to meet the requirements there. The cost for the FSA borrower training component is $150. You can see that there are 18 required topics on financial management, plus an additional 7 segments that are of the participant's choice. Brent Ladd's helping manage this for us, and so his contact information is here. His email and phone number are there. So some of the topics that you saw in eFarm Management are mirrored here. So you can see the plan is categorized for both crop producers and for livestock producers. So it's laid out to address appropriate needs of both of those parties. And so crop topics include things like crop insurance and NAP, grain production basics, grain marketing, commodity farm programs, and then livestock topics are more appropriate, focusing on basics of cow-calf production, livestock marketing, and so on. So again, for each of those topics, once you log into Brightspace, and this may be a little unfamiliar if you haven't been in a campus course in the last 10 years, but many courses on campus now are hosted in a course management software like this. And so you'll see a landing page like this that provides access to all the resources in the course. And in addition to the course components, we're trying to keep participants alerted to things like the webinar series today in which you're participating. So the drilling down into the course content, this is an example for the farm cash flow topic. You'll see that there are videos there, there are fact sheets, there are exercises, and so you'll click on those associated links to access the exercises, to complete the exercises, and to submit them. Then you'll get a grade on those, and through completion of all the exercises and quizzes over time, you'll become certified as having completed the FSA Borrower Training course. So that's just some quick insights into those 3 things that we wanted to mention that complement and hopefully provide resources to people who are either interested in farm management or concerned about their financial management skills and want to invest a little bit of time and energy in improving them. So the key is in agricultural management to be proactive to take advantage of opportunities to improve before problems become unmanageable. And so by diagnosing the problem, getting a handle on whether it's something that's temporary or it's something that's a problem in the short run but perhaps not the long run, and understanding whether the causes are external or internal. If they're external, then perhaps you can do things like take advantage of insurance to manage them. If they're internal, then that may require that you make changes. And so the challenge is to identify what are the appropriate things. So you want to look not just at the problems and the symptoms associated with that, but the potential causes. And so really digging into some options for change is important. And then going beyond the evaluation and the planning to actually implement that. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. We'd really relish input and feedback, suggestions, so we'd appreciate your use of the website here to provide some feedback. So ideally this would be posted into the chat session, but it looks like Brent has left the meeting, so I'll see if I can type it in there. But if you have any questions, please email them now while I start to type the address. We appreciate your participation in today's event, and again, welcome other suggestions for upcoming sessions. Any questions for Mike would be welcome now as well. Okay, you should be able now to click on the link here if I've accurately transcribed it from the slide. I'm not seeing questions, so again, if you have a minute, please click on the link, and we appreciate your participation and look forward to conversations later.